In the top stories, Prime Minister Drew is on an official state visit to Ghana aimed at strengthening ties and cooperation between the two countries. The government of Trinidad and Tobago has declared a state of emergency following a spike in violent crime, and escalating airstrikes in Iran and Lebanon are now sending shockwaves through global energy markets. Hello and welcome to the ZIZ Midday Major Newscast. Today is Tuesday, the 3rd day of March, and I am Jasmine Thomas. First, on the local scene. Prime Minister Dr. Terence Drew is traveling to the Republic of Ghana this week for an official state visit designed to deepen diplomatic, economic and cultural ties between the two nations. During the visit, the Prime Minister is expected to hold high-level talks with Ghana's president and senior government officials as both countries seek to strengthen cooperation across several strategic areas. Discussions will cover education, healthcare, trade and investment, climate resilience, agriculture, youth development, and cultural exchange, sectors viewed as key to long-term partnership and shared growth. Several memoranda of understanding are also expected to be signed. These include the establishment of a formal political consultation mechanism, a visa exemption arrangement for holders of ordinary passports, and a bilateral labor agreement to facilitate the recruitment of Ghanaian medical professionals. The visit forms part of broader efforts to expand engagement between St. Kitts and Nevis and the countries across the African continent. The International Monetary Fund says the St. Kitts and Nevis economy is positioned for stronger growth, greater diversification, and continued financial stability. In its 2026 Article 5 mission concluding statement, the IMF projects that real GDP will expand by just over 2% this year, with growth expected to edge higher over the medium term. That outlook is being driven by solid tourism performance, construction activity, and developing renewable energy projects, signals that the economy is broadening beyond its traditional dependence on citizenship by investment revenue. The fund noted that as CBI inflows moderate, economic momentum is increasingly coming from underlying sectors such as tourism, agriculture, infrastructure, and energy investment. That shift, it said, supports a more balanced and sustainable growth model. The IMF also described the banking system as broadly stable, with strong capital buffers and declining non-performing loans. Credit growth remains healthy, particularly in mortgages and lending linked to tourism and construction, while overall financial risks are considered manageable. On the fiscal side, the fund acknowledged that deficits remain elevated and public debt has risen modestly. However, it maintained that debt sustainability is preserved, while urging continued fiscal consolidation to rebuild buffers and strengthen resilience. The report also points to stable international reserves and steady remittance inflows, even as the country manages a wide current account deficit, a pattern the IMF says reflects strong import demand and active economic expansion. Overall, the IMF's assessment presents a picture of an economy in transition, one that is moving away from heavy reliance on CBI and toward a more diversified base while maintaining macroeconomic and financial stability. The fund cautions that global uncertainties and natural disaster risks remain factors to watch, but says that with prudent policy management, St. Kitts and Nevis is well placed to build on its current growth momentum. The St. Kitts Nevis Defense Force is expanding its capacity and modernizing operations with a focus on sustainable airport operations and stronger regional integration. Under the leadership of Acting Commander Major Coyote Sutton, The SKNDF personnel are working alongside regional military air guards and corps, including the Regional Security System and the Guyana Defense Force, to strengthen communication, improve interoperability, and enhance operational effectiveness. Military aircraft handling is now under the responsibility of the St. Kitts Nevis Defense Force, with operations being carried out in accordance with international aviation standards, a move designed to build technical competence and long-term sustainability. The force's professionalism was also demonstrated during the recent regional security system transport of police officers, ministers, and government officials for the CARICOM heads government meeting. Major Sutton said he is proud of the steady incremental achievements in capacity building and professional development within the Defense Force. The SKNDF says it remains committed to maintaining high standards, deepening regional cooperation, and building a modern, capable, and responsive defense force for the future. On the regional scene, the government of Trinidad and Tobago has once again declared a state of emergency as authorities move to address a rise in violent crime across the Twin Island Republic. In a statement, Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar said the National Security Council met on Monday, where members received briefings from the Commissioner of Police, the Chief of Defense Staff, and the head of the Strategic Services Agency. The council noted that since the previous state of emergency ended on the 21st of January 2026, there has been a surge in violent crime, much of it attributed to gang activity in several parts of the country. Officials also reported threats against members of the police service, the prison service, and other security personnel, raising concerns about national security and public safety. Prime Minister Persad-Bissessar said she had previously warned gangs that continued threats to national security would leave the government with no choice but to act. Acting on that position, she advised President Christine Kangaloo to declare a new state of emergency, which takes effect today, 3rd March, for an initial period of 3 months. Authorities say the measure is intended to give law enforcement additional powers to curb gang-related violence and restore stability. And Cuba's president has urged his government to push for urgent transformations to the island's economic and social model amid growing pressures on the country's energy supply and broader economic stability. In a Council of Ministers meeting in Havana on Monday, Miguel Diaz-Canel highlighted the need for immediate reforms as Cuba's oil reserves dwindle and supplies remain unreliable, following disrupted deliveries from Venezuela amid ongoing geopolitical tensions. The government says its priority is to overhaul key aspects of the economic system, including expanding business autonomy, encouraging foreign direct investment, and restructuring state functions. The aim is to foster greater economic flexibility as energy supply challenges continue to impact daily life and industry. Cuba has been grappling with severe fuel shortages after years of reliance on oil imports, primarily from Venezuela, a supply route interrupted following the U.S. military operation in Venezuela earlier this year. Alternative sources have remained scarce, compounding the energy crisis and contributing to power outages across the island. Prime Minister Manuel Marrero Cruz has pointed to food production and power grid reform as immediate priorities as Cuba continues to experience interrupted fuel deliveries and detailed energy shortages. The energy crunch has forced government action on several fronts. Fueling-saving measures have been put in place, including temporary suspension of some public transportation services and moving certain educational activities online. Officials have also called for municipalities to develop local sustainability strategies, emphasizing greater autonomy in managing foreign direct investment, partnerships between state and non-state actors, and engagement with Cubans living abroad. The government has tried to mitigate the crisis by distributing solar panels to schools and frontline workers, but authorities say progress on wider municipal transition plans remains slow. Analysts say the economic squeeze is further complicated by U.S. sanctions and policies on oil exports, which have deepened the supply shortfalls and pushed Cubans to adapt daily life in novel ways. As Cuba adjusts to these realities, President Diaz-Canel's call for transformation speaks to government's efforts to balance long-standing ideological structures with the practical needs of a population navigating energy and economic uncertainty. Now for a look at news on the international scene. Explosions rocked Tehran and Beirut on Tuesday as the U.S.-Israel air campaign against Iran intensified, widening the conflict and ratting global markets. Iranian drones struck U.S. embassy compounds in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, prompting Washington to close those missions and order non-essential staff to leave several countries in the region. A source familiar with Israel's war planning told Reuters the campaign was initially expected to last 2 weeks, but is moving faster than anticipated, with the aim of toppling Iran's clerical leadership. Iran says its death toll has reached 787. The conflict has also spread to Lebanon, where Hezbollah and Israel have exchanged fire. The economic impact has been immediate. Crude oil prices have jumped 15% in 2 days, while European gas prices have surged 40%. Global stocks fell sharply amid fears of prolonged disruption to energy supplies. Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, a critical route for global oil and gas, has been disrupted, while tankers holding back and costs spiking to record levels. With no clear timeline for an end to the fighting, governments and markets are now bracing for further instability across the region and beyond. The United States has imposed sanctions on Rwanda's army and 4 of its senior commanders, accusing them of fueling the conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The U.S. Treasury Department says the Rwanda Defense Force has undermined a U.S. brokered peace deal signed in December by training, equipping, and fighting alongside the M23 rebel group. Washington also accuses Rwandan troops of deploying advanced military equipment in Eastern the Democratic Republic of Congo, including drones, air defense systems, and GPS jamming technology, while actively supporting M23 operations. The sanctions freeze any assets held in the United States by the Rwandan army or the 4 officers named in bar U.S. individuals and companies from conducting financial transactions with them. The measures come 3 months after Congolese President Felix and Rwandan President Paul Kagame signed the so-called Washington Accords hosted by U.S. President Donald Trump in an effort to end years of violence in the region. Despite that agreement, fighting has continued. The M23 rebel group recently captured the strategic city of Uvira near the Burundi border before withdrawing under U.S. pressure. Rwanda has rejected the sanctions, saying this misrepresents the reality of the conflict and unfairly target one side. Kigali maintains its military presence is defensive and necessary to counter threats from armed groups operating inside Congo. The Congolese government, however, has welcomed the move, calling it a clear signal of support for its sovereignty and territorial integrity. The Trump administration says it is prepared to use all available tools to ensure both countries honor their commitments under the peace agreement. And now for a look at the weather. Conditions across St. Kitts and Nevis fair skies with a slight dust haze. Winds are blowing from the east at a moderate 14 miles per hour. Seas are between 1.5 to 2.4 meters or 5 to 8 feet, with swells reaching up to 1.8 meters or 6 feet. Small craft and high surf advisories remain in effect, particularly over open waters and elevated areas. For today, expect partly sunny skies with a 40% chance of a brief passing shower. Tonight will be partly cloudy with a 70% chance of showers. Sunset this evening is at about 6:20, and sunrise tomorrow morning will be at approximately 6:30. That brings us to the end of the Midday Major Newscast. Join us this evening for these stories and more. Thank you for tuning in. I am Jasmine Thomas. God bless you.